Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central. Before we actually get started in this video, I do want to say that none of this is my opinion. This is one of the most difficult conversations to have within Overwatch because everybody has a side and everybody agrees or disagrees to some level. And we all know that this discussion can get rather graphic and rather aggressive depending on who you're talking to. So I want to make sure that the comments and stuff stay somewhat civil whilst we're discussing this to try and actually get a point across instead of, flaming each other, calling each other out. But the point of this video isn't whether to say one-tricking is good or bad. It's highlighting the fact that Blizzard haven't been able to make a decision on this for almost over a year now. As I said, one-tricking has been one of the biggest issues to plague the game so far. Not necessarily the art of one-tricking, it's just more the discussion of whether it's a good thing or whether it should be a bannable offense from the community, because both sides have their pros and their cons. And the main point of this video is, frankly, Blizzard haven't been able to make a decision on this because no matter what they do, they're wrong. Because the community is so split on this, whether one-tricking should be a big issue or not. Blizzard decide to ban it, a good portion of the community would just leave. And if Blizzard actually actively stand up and say one-tricking is not a bannable offense, like they kind of have in the past, a lot of the community, especially the highest tiers, the pros, the top 500 players, are going to be somewhat annoyed that their competitive experience has been thwarted by some players that just refuse to play nothing but Symmetra or Torbjorn. So Blizzard have decided to do something that has actually actively given the user the option of whether it's bad or not. But most importantly, it's given you control of your own games, at least to some extent. The avoid as teammate option is fairly simple. You flag a player that you don't like that you've been played with or even against, and you can make sure that that player doesn't end up on your team. It doesn't specifically say that it's a player that you won't be matched up against on the enemy team, but I haven't seen this personally. I don't know if you guys have. If you have, let me know in the comments below. But ultimately, it's there to make sure that a player that you flagged doesn't play on the same lineup as you. So players have been using this to get rid of rather toxic players that kind of soft throw change into heroes like Widowmaker, Hanzo, or Bastion when things aren't going their way, or just generally people that they don't like. And of course, people have done this to some one-tricks. The most notable example of that so far has been onto Fury 500, who after playing one day since this change went through, was flagged for having longer queue times because people kept flagging him. And of course, this sparked a big debate. Some people saying, good, that's what the system's for, is to make sure that players get to decide that they don't want to play with Fury. But some players felt that that was abusable and frankly toxic, that people had actively gone, I don't want to play with Fury. Now frankly, this doesn't matter. This whole discussion doesn't matter. And that's exactly why Blizzard put this system in. When it comes to one-tricking, it doesn't matter what my opinion is to you, or anybody else's opinion. What you think of one-tricking is your own. And Blizzard have actively decided that you should be the one that decides what kind of players that you want to play with. Granted, they can't give you all the control, otherwise you'd make sure that you don't run into any kinds of players. And of course, that kind of system can be exploitable. But with 2 slots of a player that you can avoid, you can decide what kind of players those are. If you don't want to play with a Torbjorn or Symmetra one-trick, you could do that. All power to you. You have full control over who you decide to avoid. You can even avoid players that are called your nan just because you don't like the name, or somebody's voice because you don't like it. It's your choice. It doesn't matter if Joe Blogs or Alan Smith decide that that's bad. That's your choice. And that's exactly why the system is so good. Blizzard can't make a stance on whether one-tricking or people acting in certain ways that may be seen as toxic but not quite are good or bad, because every situation is so unique. So Blizzard have decided that you get that power to choose what you deem as bad and good. And ultimately, you don't sanction players. Fury hasn't been banned or anything like that. It's just that a number of players have decided that they don't want to play with him. And players are allowed to make that decision. And I don't necessarily believe that's toxic because that kind of works both ways. The players that don't want to play with Fury, I'm sure Fury doesn't want to play with either. He actually went on to say on a tweet longer that this was basically the case. The players that avoid him are the players that are going to be toxic with him anyway, either just calling him horrible words, soft throwing, or basically people just being horrible within the game. It basically avoids the whole toxic situation if these players don't get paired together. But the point that Fury sort of mentioned that is quite interesting is that he said basically, if you avoid to play with Fury, you get paired up with those guys that get incredibly toxic very quickly. And I feel that they're the biggest problem in Overwatch so far. It's not necessarily the cause, it's more the effect. I could deal with a Symmetra being on attack for Temple of Anubis, but I can't deal with a guy that's seen that and started throwing himself by changing to Bastion, and where you basically have a clown lineup before you even leave the gate, and basically it means that you've lost. And the toxic player is going to blame the one trick that's on your side anyway, because, oh, we got this guy, we're going to lose anyway. But the one trick isn't necessarily throwing, it's that player that has basically said GG before the game's even begun. Regardless of who you think's fault it may be, you get to decide who you want to avoid in that situation. Blizzard and Jeff Kaplan have basically gone, our hands are tied on this situation, you need to decide on yourself. And because of that, I do like the way that it works. I do feel that it's a little bit too late. But the general point of this video now is that this whole argument is void, simply because you get to decide what happens in your own games now. You get to decide the kind of players that you don't want to play alongside. And it doesn't matter the reasoning, that's just your choice. You can avoid playing with one tricks, you can avoid playing with very toxic people, soft throwers. That's your choice as the user. But I'm very interested to see how this feature works in future, whether Blizzard's going to implement or add onto it furthermore. But do let us know what you think in the comments below. It's a pretty hefty discussion, but frankly, whatever you believe is right. There's no right or wrong answers in this anymore. One tricks strictly aren't a bad thing. I get more annoyed at the people that react to one tricks kind of negatively and start to throw themselves. That's still reportable, bearing in mind, but let us know what you think. Keep the chat civil in the comments below if you can, please, and until next time, take care, we'll see you then.